Welcome to the special edition of Hannity, Scandals of the Left. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle, in tonight for Sean. The party that often prides itself for being a so-called champion for women is now facing widespread turmoil after multiple high-profile Democrats have been accused of sexual misconduct. Minnesota Senator Al Franken was forced to issue yet another apology yesterday after two more women came forward and accused him of inappropriately grabbing them from behind, bringing the total number of alleged sexual harassment victims to 4. The apology read in part, quote, "I'm a warm person. I hug people. I've learned from recent stories that in some of those encounters I crossed a line for some women, and I know that any number is too many. I feel terribly that I've made some women feel badly, and for that I am so sorry, and I want to make sure that never happens again." Senator Al Franken is not the only Democrat facing accusations of sexual misconduct. Longtime Congressman John Conyers is also accused of harassment, including one instance where he held a meeting in his underwear. Unfortunately, the so-called Party of Women's Rights isn't quite united in its response to this inter-party sexual harassment, with some calling for Conyers to step down, while others try to dodge the subject. Watch this.
Conyers says it didn't happen. You say he should resign. Why?
Because enough is enough. At this point, what I am voicing publicly is what every single private citizen is saying across America. Why are the rules for politicians in Washington different than they are for everyone else? Once we start getting into the realm of politicians, well, let's get the Ethics Commission into it, and, let's investigate this, and take forever to come up with a conclusion.
Do you think Congressman Conyers, you sit with him on judiciary, should he resign?
Well, I think the ethics process should proceed. The allegations against Congressman Conyers are clearly disturbing, disappointing, deeply troubling. The ethics investigation should be thorough. It should be swift. It should be comprehensive.
So, is it time for Conyers and Franken to resign? And will selective moral outrage over instances of sexual misconduct fracture the Democratic Party? Joining us now is Fox News contributor Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, RNC spokesperson Kayleigh McEnany, and Fox News correspondent-at-large Geraldo Rivera. Thank you for joining me on this Friday evening. Lots to discuss. And Geraldo, I'll begin with you. According to Senator Franken's spokesperson, he is expected to speak to reporters on Sunday. What do you think that he might say or should say to convince people that he should, in fact, not resign?
Well, he's been apologizing, nonstop, kind of, Kimberly, and I fully expect that he'll say that he's sorry, but that he's staying in his seat. I just have to make a quick observation. I hate when the intensity of our reaction to some of these allegations is directly related to the political party of the person being accused. I want us to have the same reaction regardless of whether the perpetrator is a Republican or a Democrat. The other thing I want to say is that I understand when someone's an accused rapist, or like Bill Cosby, or an accused sexual predator like Judge Moore is. But sex harassment, there's a big wave now. What is it exactly? Conyers wears his underwear in front of a staffer. He's an 88-year-old man. I don't know. I heard someone say today it definitely was not sexual. The thing that bugs me about Congressman Conyers specifically is that he got somehow the taxpayer to pay his settlement for allegedly being out of line with one of his staffers. That's what I don't like.
Geraldo, so you're saying he should get a pass because he's 88 and it's not sexy in his underwear? I think this is ridiculous. It's about also how he makes the other person feel. It's totally inappropriate. You shouldn't be having or conducting any kind of meeting like that. We're not giving an age pass for something like that.
My problem, Kimberly, is very simple. If it's not criminal conduct that's being alleged, then what is it exactly? It's going to the Ethics Committee, they say now. The Ethics Committee cannot, by law, review something that is a crime. If it's a crime that is alleged, then it goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office, as you, as a great attorney, already know. But, so people minimize the Ethics Committee. The Ethics Committee is not even going to get it if they're alleging a crime. If they're not alleging a crime, then what exactly is this? Are we using this new wave of sex harassment allegations to get back at bad bosses or hated ex-lovers? I just worry that we've started down a very slippery slope here, Kimberly.
Well, there has to be, of course, Lieutenant Colonel, some, due process in a situation, some standards, and also, adjudicating the situation in terms of developing a fact pattern, verifying witnesses and information. But I don't think in any way it should minimize the seriousness, of the allegations. They should be taken seriously and thoroughly investigated.
You're absolutely right, Kimberly. And what is kind of disturbing for me is the fact that who are these people that decide? Who are the people that decide which women are to be believed and which women are not to be believed? And I think that is what is most, confusing about this situation. And this goes all the way back to, let's be very honest, with Bill Clinton and the women who accused him, but yet they were not supposed to be believed and they were attacked. But yet when you have a 40-year-old case and when you talk about Roy Moore, then all of a sudden that's to be believed. But yet when it comes to Al Franken, this is just a guy who likes to hug people and it's no big deal. Or with John Conyers, we want to look a different way. There has to be a consistency in what we see happening out there, and I just don't see that consistency.
All right, Kaylee, how do you see this situation? It's tough because it can have some effect in terms of on gender lines, to see how women perceive it, or someone who's been in a situation like this. We're all for due process and adjudicating it and determining the credibility and the veracity of the witnesses and their statements. It is more complicated when things go back way in time, as the Lieutenant Colonel has posited.
Well, Kimberly, that's right. And that's why every single one of these cases has to be looked at in isolation. They can't be lumped together. Every single person should be heard. I think it's very troubling what we've seen, particularly from Congressman Conyers, when you see someone who paid $27,000 of federal taxpayer money to settle with a woman who was accusing him of firing her for not accepting his sexual advances. That in and of itself, that misuse of the taxpayer funds should be enough to call for his resignation. But what we're seeing, Kimberly, really is a case of the powerful preying on the people. It defies party lines. It's people in powerful positions, be it in Hollywood, be it in media, be it in Congress, preying on the American people. It's the swamp that Donald Trump talked about all along.
Okay, well, Geraldo, the Democratic Party and liberals have made themselves out to be the champion of women's rights. I mean, do you think we can expect a march on Washington on behalf of the women that have made these allegations or been victimized or had to sit there and have a meeting with Conyers in his underwear?
Well, I wouldn't hold my breath on that one, Kimberly. But let me just give you an example. You're mentioning Franken now, and Franken's famous now, notorious or infamous for patting the butt of someone that he took a picture with, allegedly. So that's outrageous, we say. What about the allegation that's gained quite a bit of legitimacy and currency that George H.W. Bush, Bush 41, from his wheelchair tells a joke when women stand alongside him? Who's your favorite comedian? Mine is David Copperfield, and he pats the lady on the butt. I mean, if it's outrageous for Franken, it's outrageous for George H.W. Bush. And you talk about senior citizens. He's, 93 years old now. I
know, but you were the one that seemed to be making some kind of exception for those that are elderly or infirm after a certain age, that they get some kind of, get out of sexual harassment jail free card.
Well, maybe I was speaking, as a senior citizen myself. But my main point with Conyers particularly is that the allegations now, it's one thing when he was going after allegedly some subordinate, and that's the one that got paid off with the taxpayer money. That's outrageous. And the fact that he somehow weaseled his way so he didn't have to pay it out of his own pocket, the fact that it was secret for so long, also outrageous. I think Congress is totally complicit. I think on right and left, Democrat, Republican, I can give you 100 cases where Mark Foley, Vitter, Craig, go on and on and on. How many times our leaders have been guilty of these misdeeds, Kimberly?
Well, also, and taxpayer money shouldn't go to have to pay for these misdeeds and this kind of, abuse that people have to suffer in the workplace. I mean, Kaylee, what's your response when he brings up the other side? Do you feel there's a double standard, or a hypocrisy of any sort?
No, I think from the Republican Party, you've seen an unequivocal stance from both the president and from our party saying if any allegation is true, that individual should step down. It's a clear standard, but it's one we haven't seen embraced by the Democrats. They've covered for Bill Clinton for 3 decades. And now with Congressman Conyers, you have one Democratic lawmaker as of this morning calling for him to resign. Maybe it's a handful now, but where is the consistency from their party? Don't cover for your own. Be the party of women. That's what you claim you are. Well, you're not not acting like it.
All right. Well, Lieutenant Colonel, how about that? Because, you know, they do really hold themselves out to be the gold standard, but the response and assessment and, you know, being proactive on behalf of women in the sense of the liberals and Democrats has not been their most, you know, worthy shining moment.
No, you're absolutely right. The actions do not match up with the rhetoric. And you brought up the point. I'm waiting for Madonna or Ashley Judd or some of these other individuals to come out and you know, start screaming from the rafters. But you're not going to hear that. I was in Congress when the Anthony Weiner incident came down. And, you know, for him to have done the things that he did and then continue to maybe even run for mayor of New York City. I mean, you got to put these things in perspective. But if Congress wants to do the right thing, Congress needs to let us know in full transparency who are the people that were the recipients of these taxpayer-funded bailouts for their abhorrent behavior. That is something that they need to do, or else it will be seen as some big boys club.
I think he makes a great point, Geraldo, which there has to be a full and thorough, a fair accounting from both sides in terms of how these things were handled, investigation back to understand that, where were the taxpayer funds allocated to, and after what kind of, you know, due process, et cetera, to be able to vet the allegations and then also to act in a way, you know, expeditiously to make sure that there was some kind of like justice and there was some kind of reprisal and some kind of education going forward so that this would in fact not continue to occur.
Well, you have Wieners going to jail, so justice has been served in his case. You've got this this other Republican Congressman, Barton out of Texas, who just got caught sending lewd pictures of his genitalia to girls he was courting. What's he going to do?
Well, but
now?
that was his statement is that it was in a relationship, that he was having a relationship with these different women, and that there was some back and forth in terms of, you know, please don't try to blackmail me with these photos, et cetera, that he was going to talk to Capitol Police.
You know, I was at Polo, the restaurant that you love also in New York, and Kathy Lee Gifford was there. Erica and I saw Kathy Lee at a table as we were leaving. And she says to me, Kathy Lee looks up, says to Erica and me, can you believe what's going on right now? I don't even know who to say hello to. I'm afraid that someone's going to consider it sexual harassment. I mean, maybe you know it when you see it. But my point is you need clear standards, and you need a standardized repercussions for bad behavior. Obviously, a criminal case, Weiner goes to jail. Good riddance. That's to bad rubbish. That's where we should go. You know, I think that the Congress has to clean its own house.
All right, we're tight here on time, but Kayleigh, I'm going to give you a final word as well.
Yeah, I would just say that we have a systemic problem that when an accuser brings forth a claim against a powerful lawmaker, they're instructed to go to immediate counseling, and then their name and the name of that congressman is shrouded in secrecy. It's the powerful versus the people. It's inexcusable, and Congress needs to clean this up.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel, Congress, a lot more needs to be done here. It seems like they've been failing pretty abysmally.
Yes, a lot more needs to be done. I find it very interesting that you have Congress up there deciding how much money that we can keep ourselves as they go through this tax bill process, but yet they're using our money to take care of their abhorrent behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. That's unbelievable. Bad deeds. Okay, thank you so much, panel. Fantastic to have you here tonight.
Thank you.
And one prominent Democrat is now slamming former President Bill Clinton for his history of sexual misconduct. We'll tell you who it is after the break. Stay with us as this special edition of Hannity continues. Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. Senator Franken and Congressman Conyers aren't the only prominent Democrats to be embroiled in sexual harassment scandals. For decades, multiple women have accused former President Bill Clinton of serious sexual misconduct, including rape. Now some Democrats are finally speaking out against Bill Clinton's pattern of abuse, including former senior advisor to President Obama, David Axelrod. Watch this.
You know, I was arguing with a friend who said, how can people have voted for Donald Trump after that Access Hollywood tape? And I had to be honest, and I said, look, I voted for Bill Clinton twice. And I think he was a really fine president, a brilliant guy, committed public servant. But I knew, I mean, everyone in politics knew about his behavior, and we looked the other way. And I think there's a lot of soul searching to be done.
Shocking revelation, and many believe that Bill Clinton's history of sexual misconduct and the subsequent cover-ups may have played a role in his wife's brutal 2016 defeat. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton, still promoting her book, What Happened, said that no one in the Democratic Party has sought out her advice for the 2020 presidential election. I wonder why. Watch this.
Has anyone been to see you yet? I think Kamala Harris may have been to see you. Anyone else?
Nobody's actually been to see me. I see Democrats all the time, and nobody has said, hey, I'm going to run, or I'm thinking about running, give me advice now, because it is too soon. And there may be some private planning going on by some people. I wouldn't know who. I wouldn't hazard a guess. But in terms of actually seeking out advice, people have said, hey, I want to come talk to you, but I haven't had those conversations in large measure because I said I'm going to focus next year on 2018, and then, I'll be happy to talk.
Joining us now with reaction is radio talk show host Gina Loudon and former Clinton pollster and Fox News contributor Doug Schoen. Thank you both for being here with me tonight. So obviously there's a very heated current climate of sexual misconduct, sexual harassment. There's allegations, and it's going across the board. Do you think we're going to start to see more and more Democrats distance themselves from Bill and Hillary Clinton in light of this?
Well, look, Kimberly, my sense is that with Bill Clinton, many of the allegations have already been litigated. They have been dealt with in an impeachment process or in court. To me, if they're new allegations, fine, let's deal with them. But to go back 20 years to relitigate or earlier, I just think is a waste of time and energy. I would say this. If you want to talk about Uranium One, if you want to talk about the dossier, there are a lot of unanswered questions there that I think merit our time. But to go relitigate what Bill Clinton may or may not have done, I don't think that's worthwhile. Just one other point.
Yes.
I worked for Bill Clinton from 94 to 2000. And what David Axelrod says, and he's a dear friend of mine, but what he says everyone knew, I didn't know. The revelations about Monica Lewinsky were news to me when they came out.
Okay, but there were also, and see if Gina, you can hear us now. Yes, I hear you. People were aware of what went on, and I understand about not relitigating or going to the past. However, as a former prosecutor, when a crime has been committed, I don't look the other way just because of the passage of time. To me, when there's allegations of sexual misconduct, not just harassment, but rape, as in the case of Juanita Broaddrick, which she has made that claim against the president, shouldn't that be addressed? And what about the Democrats owning up to that in terms of the double standard that they've seemed to have as of late?
Well, of course they have a double standard, Kimberly, because if they didn't have a double standard, they wouldn't have any standards at all. This is a transparent attempt on the part of the Democrat Party, now that a Clinton will never be on a ballot again, for them to claim some sort of sexual purity. This, the party of Clinton, of Weiner, of Franken, and we're supposed to fall for that? They must think voters are really stupid if they're going to fall for the Democrat Party now being the party. And just like you said, where's the apology to these women that they smeared for all these years? If they knew this was going on, why did they go along with it?
Yeah, no, she makes a great point. I mean, when you see people that have been savaged in the press, in the media, and by quite frankly, to Hillary Clinton herself, it's very disturbing. And I mean, do you think it played a role in the fact that she was, defeated in 2016?
It may well have played a role, but I think the person people voted against, for a lot of very good reasons, was Secretary Hillary Clinton. I think if she'd listened to Bill Clinton, campaigned more in the Midwest, focused on working class voters, talked about jobs, she would have done a lot better than she did trying to mimic the Obama campaign from 2008 and 2012. And you mentioned Juanita Broaddrick. As a prosecutor, you surely would know that when there are multiple stories, multiple accounts of what happened in an event, it's a much tougher case to litigate when the person who allegedly was violated has told different stories at different times.
Okay, well, she maintains that she also gave what's called a fresh complaint at the time. She complained of it. She had the physical injury to the lip that she said he said, put some ice on that. Look, I mean, the bottom line is not just Bill Clinton. What Hillary Clinton did was wrong in the way that she treated those women and then expected that she was going to go on to be, president of the United States, given her abhorrent behavior.
Yeah, the way to have done this with any legitimacy, Kimberly, would have been for the Democrat Party to come out as a party and apologize to these women. If they're so concerned about the long-term, the post-traumatic stress of women who go through these sorts of things, as they say every day, right, whenever they can get in the news, trying to take some moral high ground now, then they should be concerned about the fact that these women are still traumatized by what happened to them under that administration. And they've been continually traumatized as all of their allegations have been swept over under the rug for all of these years. And it's just too convenient a time now for them to come out and say, oh, wait a minute, we are the party of sexual purity suddenly. The public isn't going to buy this.
Okay, now, in an earlier segment, Doug, you and I were talking about this through the break. Geraldo Rivera was on, good friend here, and he was seeming to kind of give a pass by saying, well, wait a second, Conyers is older, so what if he had the meeting essentially in his underwear? I'm sure it wasn't, sexual in nature, but just because he doesn't look like David Beckham in his underwear, then it's okay to do that?
Look, I got a different view of this, Kimberly. This is a real-time, real-world event. Let's let the Ethics Committee investigate, and if the facts are as compromising as you're now suggesting and many reports have suggested, I'm not sure there's a place for him in the House. I'm not sure there's a place for Al Franken. And the reports about Joe Barton, I think on the Republican side, also merit investigation by the Ethics Committee. Put another way, I think we need to be nonpartisan about it, not try to cast one party or the other party as the party of sex. If it happens and it's egregious as these incidents suggest may have occurred, let's investigate and take the appropriate action.
Yes, regardless of partisan politics, it should have the same standard and the same due process, Gina, for either side.
Correct.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and there's a really important psychological component too for these women. I think as we're going through this process, that they are validated, that they know that some of these things have been investigated. But we also need to be very careful as a public to make sure that we make the distinction, I guess, between evidence and facts versus feelings and allegations, because there is a distinct difference, and we can't keep meshing them together like the Democrat Party seems to want to do a lot of times.
To me, this isn't partisan, Kimberly. I think you're exactly right. I think, though, Gina makes a very good point. We need to investigate allegations, see the full totality of what did or didn't happen, and make judgments there. We can't rush to judgment based on partial press reports that are not in any way full accounts of what did or didn't happen.
No, you bring up a great point, and the problem is also with the passage of time, Gina, when you see in a situation like the Roy Moore case, where there's a period of behavior that's been alleged over a very long period of time, it makes it very tough to go back to be able to examine the veracity of it and get those statements. It's not something can happen, overnight to be able to figure it out. It should be taken very seriously, like I said, on all sides.
Yes, it should be taken seriously, but it shouldn't be tried, as you both know, in the court of public opinion. And I think we insult the public, frankly, when television pundits or the media decides in general that it can try this, itself, and decide that all of a sudden now this election should be overturned for an entire state. I think that's a very dangerous precedent to set, and I think that you'd see massive public outrage if something like that were to actually happen. I think it needs to be adjudicated.
Very simply, we're going to have an election in Alabama on December 12th.
Yep.
The people will be able to decide what they want to believe, what they don't want to believe, and I hope the Senate seats the winner of that election, whoever it may be.
And then if there's an investigation that needs to continue, of course,
so be it.
so be it, with due process,
Exactly.
and evidence that is proffered and evaluated, so we can also make some kind of distinguishing factors in terms of the spectrum of statements, and then also sexual misconduct or sexual assault, which is criminal in nature and should be prosecuted if appropriate and relevant. Such a pleasure to have you both
Couldn't
here
agree
tonight.
more, Kimberly.
All right, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gina and Doug.
Thank you.
Coming up, the mainstream media has been covering up Democratic scandals for years. Well, we'll show you one new shocking example next. Don't go away. Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. The liberal mainstream media is once again caught colluding with the left. According to a report from the Washington Free Beacon, quote, WAPO reporter goes rogue, gives strategy briefing to secret Dem donor conference. The article continues, quote, Washington Post reporter Janelle Ross gave a presentation at a secretive California gathering where Democratic politicians, liberal activists, and their biggest donors plotted the future of the progressive movement without notifying her superiors that she would be attending, according to a Post spokesman. The Washington Free Beacon claims to have obtained a copy of the conference agenda that lists events and featured guests. And according to the agenda, speaking right before Janelle Ross was none other than leftist billionaire George Soros. We reached out to the Washington Post for additional comment, and we were told they have nothing more to share. Shame. All right, joining me now with reaction is the national spokesman for CORE, conservative commentator Nigel Innes, founder and executive director of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, and from Fox News Radio, Todd Starnes. Thank you all so much for being here with me tonight. So the mainstream media often fails to cover Democratic scandals. Do you think that this report, Todd, proves that it is more purposeful than just a simple kind of ignorance of the scandal and not really aware of it?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Kimberly, this is an example of not just fake news, but propaganda news, where you actually have a reporter from the Washington Post going into this secret meeting and gathering all this information. Quite frankly, it is a direct violation of the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics.
Wow. Yes.
That Code of Ethics says, and I want to read this here, avoid conflicts of interest, real or perceived, and avoid political and other outside activities that may compromise your integrity. Well, it's very clear this is exactly what this Washington Post reporter has done.
Yeah, Nigel, this is quite disturbing when you hear this report. I mean, what were your initial thoughts, when you found this out?
I was not surprised. I mean, George Soros is our very own living Dr. Evil, if you recall, from the comedy films. But it's actually deadly serious, because he's not only the foundation, if you will, of every left-wing group and supporter of every left-wing politician, from Kamala Harris to former President Obama, but he also has an international network of NGOs that he funds to sometimes openly undermine governments and counter U.S. foreign policy. One of the scandals that I hope that the media really exposes and investigates is something that 6 U.S. senators have asked Tillerson to look into, which is how our government is actually funding NGOs that are tied to George Soros, that are actually contradicting U.S. foreign policy in places as far-flung as Macedonia to Zimbabwe. That's the real scandal. And the fact that the Washington Post is in bed with these folk makes me a little concerned, but I have to say I'm not really all that surprised.
Yeah, Charlie, you surprised?
I'm not, but it's important to note George Soros is a big problem, but just right behind him, you might have missed the news with all the Black Friday shopping, but there's a new richest man. He's worth $100 billion, Jeff Bezos, who conveniently owns the Washington Post.
Yes.
In fact, he acquired it last year, and he went through a huge purge of anyone that believed in freedom and hired a bunch of very left-wing journalists and reporters. And in fact, right after Donald Trump's surprise victory, he hired personally over 50 new journalists and reporters that went all over Washington to try to find evidence of Russia collusion, so on and so forth. So no, this is of no surprise. The Washington Post, which is one of the most well-read newspapers in the country, has now become a political arm of the leftist causes. And you see they're invited on the front and center stage of the secret meeting with George Soros. But it's important to remember, Jeff Bezos is just right there with George Soros through the Washington Post doing this exact same sort of behavior.
He's absolutely right. Charlie's absolutely right, Todd, because he has become increasingly more, dangerous in terms of his level, his reach, certainly his financial ability to influence and corrupt American journalism.
Oh, absolutely. And again, consider what happened here. You had a reporter who was assigned to cover President Trump inside the secret meeting, strategizing with these progressives and with these leftists. And the Washington Post, they tell us, well, we didn't know anything about it. It's news to us. Instead of being horrified and embarrassed at the fact that one of their reporters was demonstrating a clear bias by attending that meeting.
Yeah, and seemingly no repercussions whatsoever, total blind ignorance, looking the other way, Nigel, to this situation instead of actually, engaging in journalistic ethics and following this through and doing an investigation and then providing some kind of accountability.
Can you imagine what would have happened if some Fox News reporter or some Wall Street Journal reporter had ties to the Koch brothers? I mean, this would be on the top of 60 Minutes. This would be the top page of the New York Times. The silence on the left is deafening with this conspiracy on the left. And look, there's one thing that I'm hoping in the next 3 to hopefully 7 years of President Trump's administration, that he cleans out the cobwebs of this international network. And you're right. Your other guests are right. It's not just George Soros. It's the cabal of left-wing folk like Bezos and other billionaires that we don't hear from that are behind this international effort to often undermine and contradict actually stated U.S. foreign policy and cause domestic mischief.
Yeah, well, far-reaching implications and unbelievably, inappropriate. The levels of impropriety, no bounds. I mean, Charlie, what do you do about this in terms of trying to, Nigel saying hopefully the Trump administration is going to do something. I mean, do you have some thoughts about what should be some kind of constructive framework or plan to try to investigate this and bring about some accountability and ethics?
Well, there should be some accountability and ethics, and it should start with the Attorney General should open an investigation into the Open Societies Foundation, which is George Soros' nonprofit, which, by the way, he just transferred $15 billion into. They have to give away 5% a year, and think about how much money that is. But there's good evidence to show that George Soros has been instrumental in funding grassroots left-wing groups such as Black Lives Matter and Antifa, which are now being investigated by the FBI. So you have to follow the money. You have to see, is he actually funding these groups, and where are they getting their source of training and their financial backing? And so what can be done? We need to get the Attorney General involved to see if there's any mischief involved in a lot of these domestic terror groups such as Antifa. But even more than that, we have to expose how the left have become funded by these centy billionaires, now Jeff Bezos, worth $100 billion, to corrupt our democracy and to change the trajectory of this country.
Really, Todd, it's such a serious situation because the implications are so far-reaching. I mean, you even think back just to the campaign and the paid protesters and what was going on. They're really trying to stifle, democracy and the election process. And now having the tentacles insofar as, very widely read and mainstream, so to speak, in terms of widely available newspapers that can really impact not just, American journalism, the truth, the facts that get out there, but as we've also discussed, implications of foreign and domestic policy.
What we have seen here is clear evidence of collusion, and it's not just the Washington Post. Remember back in the campaign when you had CNN asking the DNC to go over debate questions, when you had Donna Brazile turning over those questions to Hillary Clinton's campaign. Again, this is a very serious issue, and it's important for all of the viewers to understand they need to be news consumers as well. They need to be good stewards of where they get their news, and it's important for all of us to understand what's really going on here.
And read with a discerning and critical eye, Charlie, to make sure, that they're actually getting the truth. You should read from multiple sources, not just one, especially, and I think like you said, you guys, follow the money. Look to see who is behind it, who is funding this, and who is trying to fill your mind.
That's exactly right. And the left tries to say that, conservatives are the party of the rich. Well, 8 out of the 10 wealthiest counties in America voted for Hillary Clinton. And now you have the world's richest man and the 4th richest man in the country funding left-wing causes, trying to disrupt democracy here in this country. And so the left has really been funded by these people that want to create a one-world government. They do not want to see America continue its international dominance, and they want to destabilize capitalism as we know it. This is very, very dangerous. These are people that do not share our values. values. And now that they have unlimited amounts of money, they want unlimited amounts of power, which exactly we know what the left wants. And what viewers have to do is continue to pursue good news channels such as Fox and read the Wall Street Journal and stay away from a lot of these news sources that are being funded by people that do not share our values or want to see America succeed.
You know, Charlie brings up a great point, Nigel, but just the influence and the intention to corrupt an American, democracy and basically mind control people by putting forward this propaganda and pretending, parlaying it as journalism following ethical standards. That's the real problem here, that they've been able to take it this far.
It's a real crisis, and it's a generational crisis, because the biggest impact of this propaganda that you speak of is on college campuses and in our elite university institutions all across the country. So you have generations of young minds being poisoned. Exactly. And we've got an opportunity with this president in office. I applaud, I think it was Todd who said that the Attorney General really needs to investigate this, and I hope that Tillerson will take that letter from 6 United States senators that USAID needs to stop funding these George Soros-related and far left-wing groups that are oftentimes violent and kind of like a foreign version of Antifa that we spoke of earlier. This has got to be rolled up now. We've got the opportunity. We ought to break this network up as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay, Todd, quick final thought.
Well, look, instead of covering these big issues, you have people like CNN's April Ryan, who's out there suggesting Sarah Sanders faked baking a pecan pie for Thanksgiving, for goodness sakes. This is what we're dealing with.
You can't even
here.
make this stuff up.
You can't make it up. You can't make it up.
Listen, I don't fake baking pies. I just get them at like Magnolia Bakery.
It's a good-looking pie.
Right, go for the experts. All right, thank you guys so much for being with us tonight. Coming up, another NFL player kneeled during the national anthem yesterday. We're going to have President Trump's response and more as the special edition of Hannity continues. Stay with us. Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. Well, it's an American tradition to watch football on Thanksgiving Day, but one player chose to inject politics into the game. And as you can see, Olivier Vernon, defensive end for the New York Giants, took a knee during the national anthem, something he has been doing for several games now. President Trump responded on Twitter saying, quote, "Can you believe that the disrespect for our country, our flag, our anthem continues without penalty to the players? The commissioner has lost control of the hemorrhaging league. Players are the boss." Earlier this week, the president called out the NFL over suggestions of keeping teams in the locker room during the anthem. He tweeted, quote, "The NFL is now thinking about a new idea, keeping teams in the locker room during the national anthem next season." Well, that's almost as bad as kneeling. When will the highly paid commissioner finally get tough and smart? This issue is killing your league. Joining us now with reaction is Fox News contributor and pastor at the First Baptist Church in Dallas, Robert Jeffress, and Fox News contributor David Webb. David, I'll begin with you. Is this the right move for the president to continue to call out the NFL, call out the players, call out the commissioner for their unpatriotic displays?
It absolutely is, and it's simple. The president's winning on the issue. Culturally, Americans see the anthem and the flag as one. We stand for the anthem. We face the flag with his flown for those key minutes, and he's winning on that issue culturally. Look, the subjective ideas around his tweeting is just that. But the NFL's paying another price. You and I have done the business shows many times over the years. And the NFL's losing image and advertising, which means that as you look at playoff numbers, you look at sales, you look at costs, they're losing their business as well. So the players are affecting their business, and the ignorance and the uninformed part of this. Marshawn Lynch, I want to go back to him. He stands for the Mexican anthem. If you take him out of his celebrity bubble and he's arrested in Mexico, he will be treated significantly differently than he will as a celebrity. And to all those NFL players, I've said this for weeks on my show, and I'll say it again. If you really want to go back to Colin Kaepernick and you really want to protest police brutality as you see it, then turn around, because every 20 yards on the sidelines is a cop. Turn around and take a knee in front of a police officer, not to the flag and the anthem.
Yes, it just seems, Pastor Jefferson, that there is such a disconnect in terms of the messaging here and taking out in a way these unpatriotic displays. They are not benefiting the bottom line of the NFL. The viewers don't like it. Ratings sliding, all of the above. It seems that in terms of a lot of this kneeling, it's more like grandstanding.
Well, I think it is. And I think there's a bigger issue here, Kimberly. You know, whether it's calling out LeVar Ball, as the president did earlier this week, and now calling out the NFL, I think President Trump is touching on a very important issue in America right now, and that's a lack of gratitude. Look, these NFL players ought to be thanking God every day that they live in a country not only where they can earn millions of dollars every year, but they can disrespect our flag without being thrown in prison or worse, as they would if they lived in China or North Korea. And contrary to what the left would tell you, this is not a racial issue. This is a grateful issue. And it's an issue I'm glad the president is hitting head on. I mean, the fact is, if all Americans were more grateful for the good things God and others have done for us, I think you'd see a lot of the negativity in our country dissipate overnight. So I think our president is showing great moral leadership in addressing this topic.
You know, the pastor brings up such a great point, David, in terms of, you know, being a nation that is grateful for military service, for those that have shed blood, to be able to protect our rights, to express ourselves in terms of, you know, freedom of expression, First Amendment rights. There's a means and a way to do it that is respectful, like you've discussed, versus doing this behavior that there's such a disconnect. It doesn't make any logical or coherent sense what somebody like Colin Kaepernick started out to do. I don't even think they even understand what the message is behind
it. Taking the point of grateful, their right to do this was never in question. Their responsibility to do it on the job, which is affecting the league, is another thing. But there's also something else. These sailors, soldiers, this flag and what it stands for, greater than the cloth it's printed on, it stands for the very reason they can do this. So they are ungrateful. I have to say this about LeVar Ball.
Yeah.
And I tweeted this out last week. If he says shoplifting a pair of sunglasses is basically no big thing, then is it okay if we shoplift the big baller shoes because it's no big thing? I mean, but this is the thing. They're uninformed. They are ungrateful. I will stand with them when there's a real issue of brutality. I know you have. You look at the process. As a former prosecutor, you deal with the facts, and I'll be there with them.
And there's a forum to do that and a way to do it.
And you know what? There's an effective way to deal with that issue. We do need to deal with bad shoots, but we also need to respect what we have in this country.
Yeah, you know, Pastor Jeffers, what about the people that criticize the President of the United States, saying, you know, he shouldn't be getting involved in this? To me, I think it shows courageousness and transparency that he's willing to take a stand, not necessarily looking for what's popular to get involved in or not, but speaking as a businessman and a patriot and a commander-in-chief, saying, listen, let's all try to be a little bit more grateful and, you know, responsible for our behavior. And by the way, fulfill your contract that you signed and agreed to be able to go and play the game that you were paid very well and blessed to be able to go out and excel on a field.
I laugh every time I hear the president's critics saying this isn't normal for a president to weigh in on issues like this.
Yeah.
They don't get it. That is why he is president, because he does weigh on. People are tired of normal. That's why they voted for him. They want somebody who will deal with the tough topics. That's why he got elected, and I predict that's why he will get reelected. People like this kind of a president.
You know, let's talk about kind of the attitude in the country right now. It seems like, you know, every time we talk about this issue, some of the players, everything, they're not even correctly articulating what the original message is. It becomes about a different kind of protest. You know, why are they kneeling? If you ask them, then some of them can't explain. They say, well, one, it's police brutality. Then it's for equal rights, and it's constantly changing.
Well, it's the uninformed, and this is the problem we have in this country, Kimberly. We have a lot of people who are uninformed, or at least not even tactical in what they're doing. Look, if your cause is police brutality, do something about it. Kneeling on a Sunday, then going home to your mansion is not effective.
Yeah, how about going to a community outreach program or working
with local departments? Go to Chicago, over 600 murders. Go to these towns and cities. It's not racial, it's economic. Fix a lot of the economic problems in this country. Uplift as many people as you can. Go back and help the others.
Yeah. So
Kimberly?
yes, go ahead, Pastor.
I was just going to say, look, I've got a brother who's a 30-year veteran of the police department. I know police brutality is real, but it's also very rare. And it's the exception, not the rule.
Right.
And we ought to celebrate what our police do positively for us. And I agree with David. If these players are really sincere about this, what they ought to do is say in protest, I'm not going to take my salary for the next 6 months. I'm going to donate it to the ACLU to fight injustice. Why not do that if they're sincere?
No, but it's so true. You know, put their money where the mouth is. What's wrong with that idea, David?
Yeah, because it's not about action. It's trendy. It's against President Trump. It's all the things that they're playing.
Right.
Look, if they want to do the real work, I've been doing the real work in these communities for many years. Help these children, help these families. That's what we need to do in America. And that's the American family. It's not black or white. It's economic. It's cultural. Our culture is strong. When we're strong, the world is better off.
You're absolutely right. And I love your comment, Pastor Jeffers, about gratitude and how important it is to have in life and to appreciate the blessings that you have. And then if you want to, disagree or express an opinion about something, there's so many really beautiful ways to get involved to make a difference and have an impact versus just being like a showman to get more attention.
Well, there is. And yesterday on Fox, I issued what I called the gratitude challenge to all Americans. And that is make a list of 3 things you're grateful for, good things in your life. And once a day, thank God for those 3 things for the next 30 days and see if your attitude doesn't change dramatically. That would bring a lot of healing to our nation if we would do that.
All right. Well, we're very grateful to have the two of you here tonight, Pastor Jeffers and David Webb. Always a pleasure. We'll have more of this special edition of Hannity right after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left this evening. Sean will be back on Monday, and you can catch me on the 5 weekdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Hope you had a lovely Thanksgiving, and please have a great weekend.